On this video, we're taking a look at a game that is not exactly the new hotness, but it's certainly the hotness. You lot have been badgering me for ages to get this game, well, I finally bought it, I finally played it to death, and now it's finally time to tell you what I think of it. Wow, you lot have been telling me to get this game. For ages, people have said, Spirit Island is great, Spirit Island is great, you really should try it, it will suit you, you're a solo player, you'll like it, you want, go, buy it now!
Come on, do it now!
Okay, finally I did. After a few years of kind of going, I don't know if I should or not because of some multiplayer experiences, I thought, finally, let's just buy the thing. Buy it outright and play it to death and see what it's like. I even bought the Branch and Claw expansion for this in order to give it its full workings, but I will talk about Branch and Claw separately in a Beyond the Base Game video. This is a full detail review of just the base set only. Spirit Island is a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players where each player is a spirit of nature, defending their island from invading colonists who have little regard for the well-being of the land or its native inhabitants, the Dahan. And yes, I might be butchering that name, but whatever. Every turn, all spirits act simultaneously, employing powers to push the invaders back, bolster the island, and aid the Dahan. But the spirits start out small and limited and will have to learn some new tricks in order to catch up to the rapidly invading invaders, whose actions, which are automated by the game, drive them to spread across the island and establish settlements, spreading blight in their path. To win, the spirits, with the help of the Dahan, must destroy the invaders and scare away any survivors. However, the game will end in defeat if the island is overrun by blight, if any spirit is destroyed completely, or if you act too slowly and fail to drive the invaders off before they come entrenched. Regardless of how many players you have, all play is simultaneous. Firstly, every player grows their spirit slightly, by boosting their abilities and using their powers. Then, you get to choose what cards you are going to play in the round. Every spirit has access to some unique cards depending on the spirit they've chosen, but can acquire minor and major powers to bolster their repertoire. There is a fast and a slow phase though for playing these cards, which are denoted by the iconography. If you play a fast card, you can play it before the invaders get their turn, but if you play a slow card, you've got to wait until after they've played their turn, so they require a bit more forward planning. After fast powers have been triggered, the invader phase then begins. Primarily, this is related to 3 main actions that the invaders will do. Firstly, ravage. Any invaders already on certain lands will damage the land and the local Dahan. If the land is damaged too significantly, you will add blight, which is a bad thing, because not only is running out of blight on your starting card a loss condition, but also when the land becomes blighted, you flip the card and you may get a little bit of a bonus, but you may also have some detriment that hurts you for the rest of the game. Ideally, you don't want to be blighted. After the ravage, other invaders will build towns and cities across your map. These are harder to destroy, they allow people to explore nearby. Ideally, you want to get rid of these as quick as possible. And then finally, explore. Whether it's from the coastal regions or from nearby towns and cities, invaders will explore the lands and set up new areas to build. Once the invaders have had their turn, then the slow powers that players have triggered will go off, and then the round refreshes and you do so again. Players win by meeting one of the terror level conditions. As they go through the game and play cards, the players will generate fear. This cycles through a deck of cards which in turn affects the terror level. The terror level dictates what the win condition is. Either clear out all the invaders, or just the towns and cities, or just the cities, or if you can really generate the fear, just outright scare them off the island. It's a race against time to save the natural world. Are you spirits up to the challenge? That's what Spirit Island is all about. The duration of Spirit Island is highly dependent on the player count. The box says 90 to 120 minutes, but honestly I would just scratch that off the table because really all bets are off when it comes to how long this game will take. My solo games have tended to take about an hour. I'm thinking about my turns, I'm thinking about what I'm going to do, they go on for a little bit longer. Sometimes I can get it done in less than an hour, it depends on how I do in the game, but yeah, you're looking at about an hour for a solo game. 2-player can usually be done in 90 minutes, again if players know what they're doing, but don't be surprised if your first game of this takes about 2 hours. 3 and 4 players though, all bets are off. This game can go on to insane levels. 3 and 4 players will easily surpass 3 hours if you're not careful, just because of the sheer amount of discussion and forward planning.
Will this brilliant plan involve us climbing out of our trenches and walking very slowly towards the enemies?
However, Spirit Island does mitigate this issue with a couple of key points. Firstly, it's cooperative, which means that you're working together, you're discussing with other players, you're interacting, so you feel like you're engaged on that level. But secondly, all play in this is simultaneous. The growth phase, the fast powers, the slow powers, the invader thing, everything is simultaneous, which means all players are acting at the same time, which means there's none of this, right, I've done my turn, now I'll wait for it to come back round. Okay, you might not have as many powers to trigger as another player, but you're still watching what's going on, you're still taking notice of how the board map is changing, and of course, eventually it's going to come back round to you and you're going to have all your powers to trigger. So it's really engaging despite the long player length. Now granted, I'm going to be a little bit hesitant to want to play this with 4 players ever again, but certainly I will play a 3-player game of this, and despite the long length, I will still enjoy my time. But wow, have I been getting a lot of solo games of this play, because once you know the rules, it's just quick and easy to get the game set up, go through it, and then within the space of an hour, you're done, and you've had a pretty engaging time. For ease of play, I hear a lot of people mention that it's a convoluted mess. That seems a little bit harsh in my opinion, really. I mean, honestly, it's not that bad. We'll get on to the depth part later, but in terms of complexity of learning the rules, I learned the game from scratch, from the rulebook, and I didn't have too much trouble with it. I would probably say that maybe some areas or some certain rules could be laid out in a more logical sense, like, oh yeah, there's the rule for how that works, maybe that could have been in that section though rather than this section. But the book's not huge and it's pretty easy to find where you need to go, particularly as there's an index in the back, there's plenty of pictorial representation, the font's pretty big so it's easy to read. Honestly, for Greater Than Games, I found this to be one of their better rulebooks. Not to say that you won't have to peek at an FAQ every now and again though, just because of the sheer amount of card powers and how they all interact. You know, these aren't just simple collect 1 cube powers. No, these powers can get quite intricate and involved, particularly when you get into the major ones at times. And that's before you even start targeting the idea of elemental thresholds. But other than that, the FAQ is pretty comprehensive and you can easily find it on the internet, and I honestly haven't had to refer to it that much. I've just mainly used the rulebook, most of the cards make sense to me. Granted, I'm more used to this sort of game, so maybe if you're a casual gamer, this might flummox you a little bit.
Dear God, what is it like in your funny little brains? It must be so boring.
I was expecting the complexity to be a lot worse than it actually was. Now, if you've been checking my Instagram photos, you'll notice I've been playing this game quite a bit. Well, that might have something to do with this particular subject area, the tactics and strategy. It is a highly satisfying game, whether it's solo or multiplayer. You've got to plan ahead a lot. You've got essentially this big thematic puzzle to solve, and you've got all these different powers to trigger. You've got to consider your energy reserves. Do you have enough to pay for these powers? How many cards can you play in a round? You know, how many powers do you need to trigger fast? How many do you need to trigger slow? Which areas are going to ravage? Which ones are going to be building? Which are going to explore? You know a lot of this ahead of time because there's no variable element. There's no like random deck of events. We'll get onto that in the expansion review. But for now, there is a fixed deck. You know what's coming other than the exploration. That's the only bit that you don't know of. Other than that though, you can plan what's going to happen and what's going to get built. So if you are a big puzzle fan, this is definitely going to appeal to you, especially if you don't want a lot of luck in your games. The spirits lend themselves to different play styles, and there's a lot in the box, more on that later, but each one will have me playing the game differently depending on what cards I find from the random deck or what spirit I'm playing in general. One spirit wants me to run for fear, one spirit wants me to defend lots and just build myself up slowly. Another one is all about blowing up as many towns as possible. Another one is more of a restricted to ocean areas and coastal regions, whereas the inland areas it struggles with. So there's a lot of different play styles that you can get, a lot of different, in a sense, paths to victory, I suppose you can call it, even though there is only one major goal. How you get there is another question. And you can really get some good, like, interesting turnarounds when you play this. There are times when I have been halfway through a game and I'm like, I'm never going to win this. I got no chance. I've made poor decisions. My cards are useless. The invaders are everywhere. What am I supposed to do? And then half an hour later, I turn it round and you bring it back and you manage to kick them out and you win the game. They are so satisfying when you pull that kind of victory off, but it means that you don't necessarily have to write off your game when you feel like things are going bad. It's a bit like the Sentinels and the Multiverse game that I hype about as lots. That one has a similar feel. You tend to start off on the back foot and then you build yourself up and then you start fighting back. That's how Spirit Island works, and it's a very satisfying satisfying way to play a co-op game. And very rarely does a decision feel like, oh yeah, that's the obvious choice and this is dumb choice. There's so many different decisions to make and each one's going to have repercussions, and as I said, you can't do everything. You've got to choose your battles. And it's hard to make that decision. You know, I want to stop this one from ravaging, but maybe it's too much of an investment. Maybe I should just let it go, but that's going to cause problems there. Well, at least I can keep that under control. All the decisions in this game are agonizing with a good amount of tension, whether you're playing this solo or with multiplayer. But playing it solo has you making the decisions in your head by yourself with a nice small board, so it's relatively easy to keep track. If you've got a 3 or 4 player game with a ton of lands, you're going to be sat there for a while with your buddies there trying to discuss, well, hang on, I can deal with this ret lands. Can you deal with that one over there?
Go back to then.
I can, but I could use a bit of an energy boost here. Well, hang on, I got this card, I can do that.
When will then be now?
I'll help you with this. You clear out that wetlands there, and then I'm ready to base the jungles there.
How soon?
I just need to get that extra presence off my board, and then I can unlock this.
Oh!
So much discussion and interaction with your players. I've rarely seen a co-op have this much discussion between players. In terms of components and artwork, this is kind of hit and miss. There's nothing particularly bad, shall we say. There's just nothing overly stellar either. I like the artwork on the player boards. The spirits, they look cool. I love the way they've been personified, and it helps get you invested in which spirit you are. The cards are pretty cool as well. I mean, it's easy to read them. They're set out well, so you can easily tell what's what. The artwork is fine. It's nothing to write home about, but then it's not bad either. In terms of the Invaders, the models are fine, it's cheap plastic, but honestly this game does not need fancy miniatures for all the stuff, especially when you're going to crowd your island with a ton of stuff. At least once you've got the towns, cities and explorers on there, it's easy to tell what's what. I'm never looking at a land going, is that a city or a town? Oh no, that's clearly a city, and that's clearly a town, and that's clearly explorers. So from a graphic design perspective, this game probably sacrificed going too far into the artwork and component side in order to make stuff easier to use and on a kind of frequent basis. And I applaud them for that. I'm playing this game, I'm still getting a nice sense of colour and presence on the board from the board tiles and your player boards and the cards themselves, but then you at least can tell what's going on. In terms of the theme and immersion, I thought this was going to go down the route of Mage Knight. Be too puzzly, too complex, and sacrifice some of the theme in that regard. Well, 11 herbs and spices are wrong. This is one of the more immersive co-ops I have played that isn't based on a story-driven narrative campaign or whatever. This one really does well on the theme, and I think this is kind of great at in-game shtick. It worked with Sentinels in the Multiverse, it's working with this one as well. They're really good at portraying theme. Yes, it's a puzzle. Yes, you're planning ahead and you're trying to decide whether it's fast or slow or what energy you've got, but every spirit conveys the theme so well. The setting is already well represented in the mechanics. The idea that the invaders are here, they're exploring, the natives are fighting back and blight and everything, but each spirit, the way that they look, the way that they function is so well done in terms of theme. For example, let's take Ocean's Hungry Grass that I mentioned before. It puts its presence in the ocean and then migrates onto the coast. But then when you do certain growth options, you have to retreat your presence back into the ocean. And then you can put them back on the coast and then retreat them off. Exactly how waves work. The fact that it can't deal with inland areas very well makes sense. It's an ocean spirit. How would an ocean spirit be able to tackle inland areas? It works so well. But then the bringer of dreams and nightmares. You can't destroy anyone. But then that's not your style. You're there to scare everybody. So you're all about just trying to control the areas and, you know, scare them off before they build up too quick. Again, the mechanics fit the theme. A river surges in sunlight. Not particularly good at destroying things outright either, but it's very good at pushing people away. Well, it's a river. You know, flowing water kind of does that. The lightning strikes swiftly. The bird that basically is a personification of thunder and lightning. Well, what do you think that one does? It blows up towns on a regular basis. You've got the rock dude that looks a bit like Rockbire out of the Neverending Story.
Like big, good, strong hands. Get your motor running.
Very slow to build up, but a great defender of the area. And it's a case that they're slow, they get going. It's a bit like the Ents, I suppose, from Lord of the Rings. You know, they're really powerful, really good, once they get going, you just gotta get them to that stage. Every spirit feels like that. Truly unique, truly immersive, with its own kind of unique personality. Every time I play a different spirit, I get a totally different feel out of the game. If you want to go the next mile, you can even find a soundtrack online to listen to various sound effects when you're playing each spirit, or go on Mellow Dice and look at the Spirit Island soundtrack and get immersed even more. Granted, that's not part of the game, but I'm just putting that as a suggestion. Honestly, this is a really good thematic system. And now on to longevity. This is greater than games. Their shtick is kind of good on this run. You know, they're very good at coming up with replay value and lots of variety. Spirit Island, no exception. 8 spirits in the box, a bunch of minor powers, a bunch of major powers. You've got several scenarios to tweak how the game runs. You've got some adversaries with multiple different difficulty levels that you can play against. And then of course, playing with certain spirits will change your play style significantly. And then decide to play multiplayer, and different combinations of spirits will have that function. You don't necessarily have to play a spirit the same way every time. You could decide, well, you know what, I'm gonna be even with the presence tracks, or maybe I'm just gonna level the top one, maybe just the bottom one, but then it depends what cards you pick up. You're not going to play the entire game with just your basic 4, you're going to have to get more powers. So do I go for a lot of minor powers and spam them? Or do I decide, you know what, I'm going to gamble and go for that big early major power that's hopefully going to change the landscape dramatically? There are so many different ways that you can play this game. It is insane. Absolutely insane. You've then got multiple fear cards. You already use 9 in a particular game, and you know there's plenty enough to choose from. You've then got the different blight cards for your healthy and blighted island. There's different ones of those as well. Honestly, replay value is not a problem here. The first thing I did was that I decided, right, I'm going to play through every single spirit at least once. So I did. I basically learnt the rules, played a couple of practice games with the low complexity spirits first, of which you've got 4 of them that you can play with, and then thought, right, let's go with these and see what happens. And each game I got a different feel. Every game feels different. If I'm going for high damage or high fear or more control or more defense or more utility, every game felt different. So I always get like a fresh feeling every time I play a different game, and that speaks volumes for replay value with just the base box. I'm not even getting on to Branch and Clawlet. We'll talk about that in Beyond the Base Game, but honestly, you are getting your money's worth here for multiple player counts that, other than the 4-player factor of it being a little bit too long on that front, scales pretty well. Solo mode, which is the primary reason most people get this game, and the fact that you've got all those different ways to tailor each game, whew, yeah, you get your money's worth. So in summary, Spirit Island has really won me over. Like, substantially won me over, to the point where people are worried that I've got an addiction. Maybe I have. Spirit Island really has done it for me. And I'm actually almost slightly angry at the first time I played this game, because that bad teaching and that sort of really long game where nobody really knew what they were doing nearly put me off the game for life. It wasn't until I played it at my local game group and got into a 3-player game with people who know what they were doing that it felt good to actually once be the noob at the game, but I got to be involved and engaged and still contribute to the co-op theme of the game. So enough to buy it myself. And then I played game 1, game 2, game 3, game 4, game 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Damn, I'm possessed.
Bought the digital version, the tabletop simulator version. I don't do that for a lot of games. Games have to really win me over for me to want to play it again and again and again. Yes, the game is not picture perfect, but then no game ever is. The component quality is fine. It could be better, but I think it could be worse as well. Yes, the game goes on a bit long if you play with 3 or 4 players, but you're still engaged during that time. And yes, I probably won't play this with 4 players ever again, but I'll certainly play it with 3, and 2 is pretty good. And most of my games have been solo, and there's a reason why this game is top in the rankings for solo players, because for solo, it just is that good. And then all the different spirits, all the different ways to tailor the game, on top of a strong theme and a good, satisfying puzzle of starting on the back foot and then pulling it back and fighting those invaders off, is just so satisfied. It's not for the faint-hearted in terms of its rule set, but if you are into the more complex games and you want a co-op puzzle that actually does a good job of retaining that theme. I can think of no better alternative than Spirit Island. It is hands down, like, deserving of a distinction level seal 10 out of 10 rating from me. I have been won over by Spirit Island. I have seen the light. Check out the live stream I did with the Nerd Shelves recently where I talked about games that needed a second play. Well, this one needed the second play. I didn't get won over by it the first time, but when I gave it that second chance, I then realised I'm a moron for not playing this earlier. Well, I now have it. I have Branching Claw, we'll get onto that in another video, and I know that I'm going to receive Jagged Earth and the promos in the future. I'll probably do a Beyond the Base Game review of that as well when they come through, but I cannot wait. I love this game. This game is going to be high in my top 100. I can see it now. Who knows where it will end up, but I am really enjoying it. I am playing this game repeatedly and I cannot wait for the next multiplayer game I play even, because for once I feel good about being on the back foot. I'm not the expert at a game anymore. Granted, I'm not the expert at many games, but you know, I'll play a game with someone like Abyss and I'll trounce them in the first game because they don't know what they're doing. It's great though to play a game where now I have to ask for advice, like, what do you recommend I do this turn, or how does this work? But it's a co-op, so people are willing to help. I feel like I'm still part of the team. Honestly, it is this good. If you have not tried it and you are a solo player, I strongly recommend you do. But even if you don't, it's not going to stop me playing it. I love it. Oh, wait, I'm still recording. So that's it for this video. If you like what you see, please consider subscribing and please consider being a Patreon as well. It goes towards helping this channel get more review copies and put out this video content for you. Also, don't forget to check the description for my code for zatu.co.uk, where you can get 5% discount on your whole basket of games no matter what you purchase. If there's a gap on your shelf that needs filling, or perhaps you need a copy of Spirit Island after I've just been raving about it, go to Zatu, consider buying it from them and save yourself some pennies while you can. So that's all from me. I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple video. And remember, despite my love for this game, it's still at the end only a game. Gotta get back to reality as well. Take care. Bye for now.